All right, Falcons, welcome to our virtual career week. Our special guest today is Gregor Chisholm. Gregor comes to us from Toronto. He is a former writer for the Toronto Blue Jays and current writer for the Toronto Star. Welcome to Forest Hills, Gregor.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. We're going to get right to our questions, and our questions are all generated by our middle school students. Our first question is, what inspired you to choose your career?
Oh man, I always knew I wanted to do something in sports journalism specifically, because when I was growing up in St. John, I kind of realized at an early age that I knew I wanted to work in sports, but I probably wasn't going to be good enough to actually make money doing it. So I tried to figure out a way where I could, when I was in school, I always thought about baseball games and basketball games at night. That I always wanted to prepare for a future in sports. So I used to always lobby my parents that was like my real homework, because that would come in kind of handy later in life. And so I always knew I wanted to do something in sports. I wanted it to be in basketball or baseball. Those were the two that I wanted the most. And when I was in high school, I started kind of emailing around to some writers in Toronto that I wrote and whose work I followed, and kind of figured out what the best course would be to trying to get into sports journalism, and tried to follow their advice along the way in terms of like what schools to go to, what courses to take, and what kind of experience to get along the way. But for me, it was always about trying to find a way to make a living in sports, because that was my biggest passion growing up, for sure.
Excellent. And I know a lot of our students share that same passion, and it's exciting for them to hear there's different paths to work in sports than just the athletes themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like when I was in school, like I took kinesiology in university, and that could have kind of taken me in a path of like a different kind of athletic direction. But yeah, it was trying to find a way to make a living in sports, because that to me was the most exciting thing. When I was growing up, I guess I was decent enough in some subjects like math and English and stuff like that, but it was always, no matter what, I always wanted to tie it somehow back to sports. And so journalism was kind of like an interesting way to kind of go and do that. Like you can certainly go in different directions with journalism, with news and all kinds of other kind of topics. But for me, it was always going to be sports from day one. And I guess that's where I'm happy I ended up doing.
Excellent. What is the favorite thing about your job?
Oh man, it's so in my job, I primarily cover baseball. I do some basketball as well with the Raptors, but the best thing that I like about the job is, my office is the ballpark. So every day I'm going down, getting to watch a game every single night in person. Usually about, out of 162 games, I probably usually cover about 140. And so between the traveling around throughout the United States, wherever the Blue Jays go, or just being at the ballpark every night. When I was a kid growing up, one of my goals was always to try and make it to all 30 ballparks across Major League Baseball. And I've gotten 29 of them down. I still have to do the Los Angeles Dodger Stadium. But that's the only one. So that's kind of, it's the most exciting thing to me is kind of been traveling around, following the team, and seeing some of those ballparks, seeing some of those cities that I had never been to growing up. And then in Toronto, it's just a privilege to be able to go down to the ballpark every day and kind of set up shop and make that your working space.
Very cool. Very cool story. What are some of the roadblocks that you have had, and did you have a specific failure that you overcame that helped drive you a little bit further in your career?
It's an interesting one. A lot of the roadblocks I faced was probably early in my career, like moving from the Maritimes to Toronto. I went to school at St. FX in Nova Scotia, and then I went to school at Ryerson in Toronto. And by the time I was done St. FX, I'd already done a bit of journalism stuff, and I kind of thought that I was probably ready for an actual full-time job and wanting to break into the industry. And in the early years, that's a lot easier said than done. So I thought maybe I'd be able to get a job right out of school at St. FX. Quickly realized that I probably was going to need a little bit more training. And so I went to Ryerson for that. And so it was really the biggest obstacle was kind of getting your foot in the door. And early in my career, I really kind of bounced around to a lot of different places, kind of really taking any experience that I could possibly get. So I was a script writer at TSN doing stuff for Sports Center. I worked at the Toronto Sun for a little while. I took up pretty much any odd job that would actually get me into any kind of ballpark or any kind of stadium to try and write where I could. and then kind of just moving on from there. And so the last few years, I've been a little bit more fortunate. Like I was at Major League Baseball for about 10 years, and then that opened the door to move over to the Toronto Star and do something a little bit different, kind of writing a little bit with more of opinion than I was before. And so that's kind of been it. But the roadblock was definitely early on. Like for anyone later on in their career, when they try to get started, don't get frustrated early on. I mean, these things take time. I was fortunate to get a job relatively early covering the Blue Jays, kind of in my mid-20s, a bit earlier than some other people might. But those first few years were a grind, and you just kind of have to build up your resume over time. You kind of take one experience at a time, and then later on, you kind of hope that it all comes together and that, you know, you're in the right place at the right time for a job.
What kind of help did you receive along the way?
Oh, I got a lot of help from, in school, through professors kind of growing up. When I was at Ryerson, like that school really kind of opened the door to an internship, which is kind of how I got started to a certain extent. My internship was at TSN, and my internship at TSN kind of helped me get in the door with an internship at Major League Baseball. And then that internship helped me, get a full-time job a little bit later. So, there's been a lot of people early on in my career, especially like there was a lot of guys I leaned on, kind of older journalists, when I was trying to figure out a way to kind of get into this industry. That's a big key for people trying to get started in a career too, is to talk to some of the people who've been there before. And so there's a guy, Bob Elliott, he was a columnist at the Toronto Sun when I was growing up, and he was someone I leaned on early in my career, and just in terms of getting the advice on who I should be writing for, what types of things I should be looking out for, and where I should be going to school. And his advice was probably what I followed the closest kind of growing up, and just kind of figuring out the right path for me.
Very cool. And our last question from our students today: when you're working in a environment where you sometimes have to lean on others, how important is it to get along with your colleagues and work in a team environment?
Oh, it's so important. One, if you get along with people at your work, you're just going to have a more enjoyable experience. I mean, that way it's kind of very similar to school. I mean, if you have your friends and, people that you like to be around, it's going to make your day more enjoyable. And then in the workplace, I mean, how I work is, I work with a lot of people, but they all work for different outlets. Like I work for the Toronto Star. The people I'm working beside might be working for Major League Baseball. They might be working for the Toronto Sun. We're technically competitors, but at the same time, we're really coworkers too. And those people are really key to my day-to-day enjoyment of what we do. I mean, those are the guys that I joke around with. Those are the ones that I go out with after games. They really kind of change things. And then when you're actually at work in that environment, I mean, it's whether or not they're your competitors or your coworkers, I mean, it's really important to get along with them, because there are going to be times where you're going to need help. There are going to be times when you need advice. And if you have that kind of positive working environment, it just makes everything more enjoyable. And who doesn't like to have fun at work? So, it's cooperation and working together and teamwork, regardless of whether you work for the same company or not. If you're in the same industry, those are the people who are going to help you have success and enjoy what you do on a day-to-day basis.
That's a great answer. That's sometimes how we feel about our job. We get to work with our students every day. We get to have fun with our students every day, and that makes us want to come back to work each and every day. We'll give you an opportunity to give one final message to our students here at Forest Hills for Virtual Career Week.
Oh, geez, I don't even know what to say. I can copy Tom Halford and say, go Falcons. But, I'm also going to say it's an interesting year with COVID and everything that's going on. It's different than anything that's kind of come before. This is kind of looking forward. And so, these career weeks, hopefully you guys use this as an opportunity to think about what's out there. And you have all kinds of time to make decisions on what you guys want to do later in life. But you don't have to just fall back into what everybody else is doing too. There are opportunities to kind of chart your own path and what you want to do. And so when you're growing up, if there's something that you're really passionate about, follow that, because there are ways to get into just about anything. When I was growing up, I guess, I wanted to become a sports journalist, but there weren't too many people from the Maritimes that I knew that had kind of gone down that path. At the time, I didn't really let that stop me, and kind of found a bit of a unique kind of career path, I guess. And so if there's something that you're passionate about, do the exact same thing. Follow it and see where it takes you, because ultimately what you choose as your career is going to, you know, dictate how much fun you have in life and what you do. And you want to do something that you enjoy on a day-to-day basis when you're working. So keep that in mind when you're looking at all these different careers that people are doing, and all the paths that you can take later on in life.
It's a great message to finish off for our students, and on behalf of the students and staff at Forest Hills School, we want to thank you for joining us today and send good luck to you in the future, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.